This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rapin. Joining me for a very special minisode, the one and only Danny.
Hello, everyone.
Danny, I'm super excited that you're here with me today because we have two amazing guests, editors for a brand new Kickstarter that's dropped as of this episode's airing, Jason Holtzman.
Hello, hello.
And Logan Rodgers.
Howdy.
Thank you both for joining me on this week's episode. I'm super excited because we're here to talk to you guys about Tales from the Cloakroom Volume 2. Scott Snyder presents. It's a Kickstarter. It's live. There is a link in the show notes for everyone. But I guess before we get into things, I've got to introduce the two of you. Jason, could you tell us a little bit about yourself for the folks at home?
Hello, all loyal listeners. So I'm an undergraduate at Ball State University. I just finished up my first year. I've got a media major in media promotion and management with a minor in creative writing. And the ultimate goal after college is to go into publishing. So that's why I'm here working on this Kickstarter, garnering experience. Hopefully I'll be able to be an editor for comics in my future. And I had a really great experience with this, and I'm looking forward to what comes next.
Awesome. Super excited to have you here. And Logan, tell the folks at home about yourself as well.
Hello, I'm Logan. So I am a comic book writer, artist, as well as a playwright. I'm currently in I'm in graduate school. The other one, the part 2 one, I'm in graduate school at Augsburg University, getting my MFA in fiction and playwriting. I'm going into my last year, as I just finished my spring semester, going into my last year this fall, and after that, I'll be done. My long-term ambition is to get my own comics imprint going where I can just sort of make my own stuff and, just be master of my own destiny as far as my artistic projects go.
Awesome. Love to hear it. I'm very excited to talk to you guys because previously we had C.K. Carpenter and Aubrey Lynn Jepson on the show to talk about Volume 1 of Tales from the Cloakroom, and that was such an amazing experience and an incredible anthology. I was excited to hear that you guys are doing a Volume 2, so I guess before we get into talking all about that, I think the folks at home might want to also know a little bit about what kind of comics you two are into. So I guess let's dive into things. Danny, as we usually do on the show, tell us how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's just kick things off there.
Mike, I'm doing pretty well. I will say I do feel a little underqualified now to be part of this podcast after hearing our guest credentials.
Sure.
Because comics for me, as you know, is just a hobby. Like, it is my life and it consumes every minute of it. But I have no professional training for anything that I'm doing online.
Sure.
But no, I'm doing very well. I do. It's really weird recording things for the future, which is it's like time traveling almost. But I picked something that I think it's more kind of like everlasting. So I actually started catching up on the Dragonball Super manga, chapters 88 through 92. The Superheroes Are Born arc. I'm very excited, but this is written by Akira Toriyama, of course, with art by Toyotaro, translated by Caleb Cook, and with letters by Brandon Bovia. So this is adapting the latest superhero film that came out in theaters earlier this year, but it's going to expand on that story, which I really, really like. This is following Trunks and Goten as they're teenagers, and they continue the tradition of the Great Saiyaman. They are now Saiyaman X1 and X2, which I find very endearing because I really wanted to see more of both of those characters. But I feel like both the anime and the manga kind of like, they're really just focusing on like Goku and Vegeta just powering up more and more and more, right?
Yeah.
So even the movie, it's a really nice just look at something else because it really focuses on what's going on Earth, and it brings back the Red Ribbon Army. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. I think all 4 Dragon Ball Super movies are top notch. Even if you don't want to watch the anime, you should still watch the films. Yeah, I've always wished we had more Trunks and Goten stories. So I'm very glad to be reading this. Of course, the villains are these like weird Halloween monsters, kind of, because Akira Toriyama just loves to come back to that little trope of like any android kind of being is gonna look like a Western Universal type of monster.
Yeah.
Which is really fun. But then things start kind of connecting into the film, and we go from there. So I don't know if anybody else has been reading this or has watched the film.
I've been reading the manga and I love it, and I was very worried that someone on the show was going to bring it up because it would push me ever closer to buying that incredibly cool Piccolo statue that came out recently, and I just shouldn't. Like, there's no reason for me to have it, but I really want yellow Piccolo. It looks so cool. But yeah, I haven't seen the movies, but I've been loving the manga, which is I need to get out. I need to sit down and actually watch the movie because I heard that it's really good. Are Logan, Jason, or either of you into Dragon Ball at all? Or are we just
Oh,
isolating you
God,
guys
yes.
completely?
No, so my credentials are lacking in that department. Not because
Okay.
I'm not a Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z fan, but because I was a part of that late 90s, early 2000s Toonami and Adult Swim wave where you had like Big O, you had Dragon Ball, you had Dragon Ball Z.
Heck
And
yeah.
so that was my childhood. And then I was a part of that weird oasis where we had Dragon Ball GT for a tiny bit. It burnt out, and
Yeah.
then we went back and retconned GT. And
Yep.
I just never got into Super because I think it came out either towards the end of high school for me or when I was starting college. And my older sister is much more into Dragon Ball than I will ever be. Not because I'm not a fan, but just because like the way that I am about different series is the way that she is. But I like Budokai was like the original Budokai was
Oh.
always on in my house as a kid.
Yes. Amazing. Amazing. Jason, what about you?
I have very little knowledge of Dragon Ball Z. All of it comes from they recently had a ginormous crossover with Fortnite, and many of my friends were super excited
Oh, yeah.
about that. So
Yeah, dude.
I was playing with them while they bought battle passes and completed challenges, and I got some Fortnite knowledge, or some Dragon Ball knowledge. The one thing I'm happy about, I was in Mexico in around December or around November during
Mhm.
Thanksgiving, and one of those friends, he's Hispanic, and I was able to get some translations of the manga in Spanish for him. He doesn't get the chance to read a lot of books in Spanish, and he really enjoys it, so he was happy to have those. But other than that, I can't
Nice.
say I know much about it.
That's okay. That's okay. No judgments. I just wanted to make sure that everyone had a chance to talk about one of the greatest manga ever featuring my favorite character of all time, Vegeta. Just that's all I wanted to make sure we talked about.
Yeah, you
Um,
can't see Mike's shirt as we're recording,
Oh,
but he is
right.
wearing a Vegeta shirt.
Yeah.
So
Christopher Sabat is one of my favorite voice actors. Like
Oh,
he's on my
yes.
short list of people. Like I used to do voice acting lessons a little bit, and he was on my short list of people that if I ever got to meet, I just wanted to give a hug.
Well, make sure you get to come to New York City Comic Con. He was there like I think 3 or 4 years ago or something.
he's usually
Sometimes,
there.
sometimes.
Yeah.
But anyways, I guess Jason, let's jump over to you. What have you been reading? How have you been? I mean, welcome to the
So,
show, but you know that's how we do things here.
thank you. I mean, as always, it's like summer comes around and there's no school, and I get to power through things, and then school starts, and my book pile just stacks up on various shelves. So I'm just now, with everything slowing down and finally starting to read, like do a lot more reading. I'm in
Nice.
between series. I started Brubaker in Philip's second volume of Criminal because they ran for like 10 issues, and there was a little bookstore in one of like the halls on my campus, and all 10 issues were in there, so I just bought them all. I was like, okay. And then I'm 3 issues into Mark Grunwald's Squadron Supreme, which, if you're unfamiliar, is built like literally on the back. It's like before
Interesting.
Marvels, before Watchmen, before Kingdom Come, there was Squadron Supreme. So I'm enjoying it. It's an interesting read so far. But yeah, that's what I've been reading. Oh, and then
Interesting.
also, I don't listen to audiobooks a lot, but I'm slowly becoming a fan of them as a way to read while I do like dishes and stuff like that. I've been listening to the
Mhm.
original Thrawn trilogy to catch up on my Star Wars legacy knowledge, and I do love the audio because they have sound effects and music. I love the voice
Dude,
acting. It's super fun. Like they're super fun.
that's setting the bar at like 100 out of 10. Like you can never go back to audiobooks. You can't go to podcasts after this. Like you've ruined yourself. I'm sorry, Jason, but that's it for you with audiobooks.
Yeah.
I enjoy them.
Oh,
Totally.
quality
Totally.
stuff. Quality
Yeah.
stuff.
I've got it in my library. Haven't listened yet.
I was gonna say I still need Marvel to finish adapting the Thrawn books because they only let Jodie Hauser adapt the first one, and that's the only one I've read because I read it in comic book form because I don't think I'll ever get to it in its current medium. So I need Marvel to maybe hopefully these upcoming TV shows will make them step it up and want more Thrawn out there for the people.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, Logan, what about you? What have you been reading? How you been?
I've been good. I've been busy just finishing the semester and everything. So reading, I'm doing a bit of a childhood deep dive because the last Indiana Jones movie is coming out soon. And
Yeah.
so I've done a bunch of like I have gone on like internetarchive.com and found a bunch of obscure lost Indiana Jones comics. I ordered off of eBay the Young Indiana Jones and the Curse of the Jackal comic that I had as a
Okay.
kid, one of my first comics I bought in the shop, and that's the episode. If you watched the original show way back when, all the made-for-TV movies, that's the only time Harrison Ford came back to play Indy between Last Crusade and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and it's just literally 5 minutes of footage. You can watch it on YouTube, but that's why I got that issue as a kid when I saw it on the shelf, because I was like, it's Indy, it's my guy. So I have since lost whichever one I had as a kid, but been on this deep dive where I went back, I bought the Infernal Machine video game and the Emperor's Tomb video game on Steam. I've been playing that, and that got me started on my LucasArts like nostalgia kick. So I started playing Knights of the Old Republic 2
Ooh.
again for the first time in years, and I am slowly sniffing down the KOTOR comics on the Comixology app. We'll probably end up buckling and buying the omnibuses because Darth Revan and all of everything that happened then. I'm such a weird case when it comes to like Star Wars nostalgia, because like when a lot of people my age talk about Star Wars nostalgia, they're like the cartoon Clone Wars, not the digital animated one, but the 2D one, and then
Mm-hmm.
it lead up to Episode 3 and all the hype. And for me, it was all about Darth Revan. So
Okay.
that's what like early 2000 Star Wars is for me. So that's been my fun little deep dive. And the only other thing is Cy Spurrier has a series right now. It's already all out called Damn Them All. It's
Mm-hmm.
sort of a spiritual successor to John Constantine, like the run that he did there.
Yeah.
Different universe, different rules. I'm not trying to say like it's just the ideas he didn't get to use in Constantine, but it definitely feels very much like working class London magicians all trying to like solve crazy spooky cosmic problems that they somehow do and don't understand, and it's just chaotic, wacky, satanic fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Cy Spurrier, top tier artist or creator for me. Like I have like behind me on my shelf here his X-Men Legacy runs, like one of my favorite runs of all time. I've been meaning to read that. I'm glad that you reminded me that that's out, because I think I have either all the issues or the collected edition or something like on my iPad. I just need to actually sit down and read it. And if I didn't know what it was about, I just knew that it was Cy Spurrier. So that's exciting. If it's more spooky magic stuff, I might actually go pick up a physical copy of that, because I love Cy Spurrier.
As soon as I finished Dan the Mall #1, I was like, "Oh, you wanted to write more Constantine, and they just didn't let you, huh?" Okay,
Thank you.
yeah,
I'm happy I'm not the only person who thought
no,
that.
no, no,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. Well, I guess for me, I've been okay. I've been just hanging out and doing all sorts of funky business. When this airs, it will be a completely different time in my life. I'm certain of it. But
It'll be summer, Mike.
it'll be summer. That's what we're gonna say. But I did sit down and read a copy of this book that I've been sitting on for forever. I backed it on Kickstarter way back in the day. It's called Killtopia #1. There's 5 issues of this out. It's written by a guy named Dave Cook, art by Craig Patton. It's cyberpunky. It's robots. It's killing games. It's nanotech viruses. It's got everything that you would want in like a cyberpunk story. And the patron saint of this story seems to be everyone like worshiping this idea of these killing games. It's a really interesting book. I like the first issue. The art is incredible, though it wavers from like page to page, which is really weird. It seemed like some of the pages were inked and some of them weren't, which makes me think that maybe I have a bad digital copy or something. But yeah, otherwise it's an amazing book. Like I flew through it. It's like 52 pages an issue. I really want to get a whole collected edition of it, and I don't know if they ever released that, but if I can get my hands on it, like this would be a really sick book to have on my shelf. But yeah, if you're into that whole genre, I know cyberpunk is pretty played right now, but like if you want to get something fresh from a creator that maybe you've never heard of with a different take on things a little bit, I think Killtopia is really solid. And I really would love to have a can of kaiju soda. That's the kaiju cola. That's what they have, is like these really well designed cans of soda that kind of just are sparingly throughout the issue of Kaiju Cola, which I'm like, that's really cool. What a cool, like, catchy name. But yeah, that's really fun. But yeah, I guess let's move on. I guess let's talk a little bit about this Kickstarter, Jason and Logan, that you guys are editing. How did this whole ordeal come to be? And I guess maybe we could take a step back and ask, how did you both like get into comics? What took you from like, I love reading comics at some point in my adult life to I'm going to be editing a book now? So I guess Jason, Logan, whoever wants to start, let's jump right in.
I eventually got into comics through years of watching like TV shows and Marvel movies and stuff like that. And as far as wanting to become an editor and get into publishing, right? All those years in high school, like, what do I really want to do when I finally get out of here? I'm not quite sure. I always had an
Mm-hmm.
interest in writing, but speaking bluntly, I have a lot of respect for writers and artists out there. I mean, writers even in other mediums. Today, the Writers Guild Association just went on strike, which is big news. Time this drops, we'll see if there have been any ramifications from that or not. But
Mm-hmm.
my point to that being is like that is very much like a grind. It's a very tough way of living. Not that I'm adverse to work, but I was sitting there thinking to myself, like, I don't know if I want to go through that, especially with a girlfriend who will probably be a teacher. That's what she's aiming for. I'm like, I'd like something a little bit more secure.
Sure.
And so that's what, even though publishing can be a little volatile, it means a salary job. I still get to be creative, but I also get health insurance and like a 401k or something like that. So that's how I kind of got
Sure.
interested.
Yeah.
That's how I got interested in leaning having a job that's still creative and might involve some writing, but is also a little bit more secure. So I lean towards editing. I spent a lot of time, like my junior, senior year of high school, just reaching out to editors and artists and be like, hey, can you tell me about your job, how you got your job, this, and this? And it got to the point,
Bold.
yeah, I mean, it works. And I don't want to make editors mad at me because their inboxes get blown up, but like, really, you email them and there's three options. They answer your questions, cool. They don't, or they don't respond, or they say no. Oh well, like it doesn't
Sure.
affect me,
Sure.
right? Like I'm just like a high schooler. So, but it got to the point where, not to say I knew all like the questions, but I was getting the same answers, and I didn't really have like I felt like I didn't have new questions to ask. So I was like, okay, I know the bare bones, I know what's here. The next step for me, maybe to ask more in-depth questions with these connections, is I got to get experience, right? That's the only way I know, like, if I'll enjoy
Totally.
this moving forward, if I'll know, like, it's something I really want to pursue, if it will give me more questions to ask. And that's how I ended up here. I had I reached out to the volume one because they were at the tail end of it, and I hadn't known, but I was also still a senior in high school, so I was like, they really want like a senior in high school on their team? I don't know. By the time I reached out, they were wrapping things up. So yeah, I kept my eyes out
Mm-hmm.
for if they do a volume two. Logan kind of beat me to the punch in terms of fishing around for people out there. I talked with Logan, and now I'm here. So
Awesome. No, that's awesome. That's a killer story. I applaud the boldness because I, you know what, as a high schooler, even as a college student, even as an adult, I'm like 34. I don't even have the guts to like blind email someone something. So that's awesome, dude. But Logan, what about you? What took you from like interested in comics to like working on comics?
So I grew up in the sort of 90s weird phase of superhero comics where like everyone was at Image, and so DC and Marvel were trying to do everything that they possibly could to like try to attract like readers. So they did like the DC versus Marvel 6-issue crossover where there was like a box in New York City where they fell through, and then all of a sudden they made the Amalgam universe, which was like the short-lived Dark Claw, which was Wolverine and Batman as one character, and then like they merged a whole bunch of different ones. And so I was like maybe 4 or 5 when they were doing all of that. And I grew up in a family of comic readers. So I was going
Cool.
to comic shops and seeing that. Obviously, Logan and Wolverine are synchronous. So when the 2000 X-Men movie came out, it was just like in my head. And ever since then it was just like there is a reality, and that reality is the Marvel universe.
Hmm.
which ended up being a hot topic in my family for dinner table conversation when I jumped ship and became a DC primary fan in my teenage years.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Crossing party
Yeah.
lines. What are you talking about?
And I have stayed over in that camp ever since, though the X-Men still have my heart, and I think they
Sure.
always will. But
Same.
but yeah, when it comes to the superhero universes, I typically opt for DC a little bit more.
Yeah.
Same here.
We don't pick sides. We don't pick sides, right? But
Yeah, listen,
but we
Danny
all
and I are
have.
just constantly fighting. That's all that it is. That's
Yeah.
fine.
I don't know. Alan Moore has more of a catalog over there, so when I do my backlogs, I have all of that to go to. So yeah, I did sort of the standard what everyone does when they hit like middle school or such. They read Watchmen, they read Dark Knight Returns, V for Vendetta. They go down the list of Vertigo and like whatever like the edgy like mind expanding stuff is.
Sure.
Consummate Doom Patrol fan, and like I don't say this lightly. I think like Tom King's Mr. Miracle is like on par with like Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns as far as like how good they are as superhero comics.
Totally
Like,
agree.
Yep.
yes,
Yep,
I
for
think
sure.
that it is my favorite superhero comic I've read in so long, and it remains that way. So yeah, I always was a comics reader, and I was also a theater kid. And then one day I was listening to a podcast where Chris Claremont was like, "Yeah, I started writing comics a little bit for supplemental income, but I was actually a theater student," and that just like blew my brain. Where I was like,
Right.
"He was an actor? What?" And so obvious, like when you think about it, the pipeline is obvious.
Oh, yeah,
Like
yeah.
nerds and nerds and nerds just
Yeah,
love
yeah.
nerdy stuff. But at the time when I was 19, it melted my brain and got me shooting off down that direction. And next thing I knew, I was spending a little bit more time writing comics and at the drawing board than I was in the rehearsal room. And
Gotcha.
then here we are eventually with Tales from the Cloakroom Volume 2.
Awesome. Awesome.
Very cool. I mean, if you ever met Chris Claremont, you can tell he's got that swagger of an actor. So,
Oh, I
yeah,
have.
Oh,
yeah. So
yeah.
that makes all that stuff makes perfect sense. But since you bring up the theater, I wanted to ask you both, and we can start with you, Logan. What other media do you enjoy, and how does that stuff factor into your work with Tales from the Cloakroom and the Kickstarter, or even your editing and everything you're doing?
Yeah, so with theater, I actually have always thought of theater as closer to comics than film because film is contextualized by movement and it's a bunch of series and it's a series of images in concert to create a sensation. Whereas theater is real time, real space. You're sitting there with the thing and feeling emotion presently with it. I'm not saying that like you don't have that with film also, but everything in theater is very immediate and everything in comics is very immediate. Comics is how do you freeze motion and emotion to be active while staying absolutely frozen. Like if are there any Doctor Who fans in the house, the 50th anniversary episode where the Doctor looks at the painting of Gallifrey during the Time War and it's like, "Oh, it's Time Lord art. It's a frozen slice of time in a
Mm.
painting," and he walks towards it and like it's literally that moment in time frozen in a painting frame. And that's how I've always thought about comics is it is a moment of frozen time, emotion. And when you look at it, it gives you all of the immediacy that watching actors in real time perform drama do on stage. So I've always carried that with me. And that's the playwright in me coming over into the comics realm.
I totally can see that pairing though. That's like a perfect amalgamation of things.
I mean, and if you've ever read an X-Men comic, you got the drama right
I
there.
know, yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. Jason, what about you?
So I guess I say I'm a little bit different than Logan, in which I don't have a particular like other medium I'm focused on that I really carry over to my love of comics. I'll just say, in general, since I've been young, my parents always inspired me to read, and my life, and I think this is more back to telling why I wanted to be an editor. I've always been all about stories. And it doesn't matter what kind of story. My shelf has like Shakespeare's Julius Caesar next to Frankenstein, next to Mr. Miracle, which we just mentioned. And then I'm listening to the Thrawn audiobooks. I'll seek out the stories and song. Rest in peace, Gordon Lightfoot. I love the wreck of Edmund Fitzgerald. There used to be a day every year a local radio station would play that. Stories are just something I love to consume of all different genres, and that does tie well in the sense that when you do an anthology, because you open it up, it's a western, it's a horror western, then it's a
Yeah.
sci-fi, then it's a think piece, then it's just like a straight horror, and so it works well, and it's something I enjoy. I like looking at how do you use the pieces you have to tell a different story, like tell a story in this way. How is it similar from the ones I just read? How is it different, like that? So
Gotcha. No, that's super cool. I mean, speaking of, I guess the anthology, I mean, that's kind of like a perfect lead in. The thing that I was curious about, I think the first time when we talked to CK and we talked to Aubrey last time, they said like there was kind of a theme for the Kickstarter. And this one, you kind of already described the thing that I was going to bring up. Like the preview that we saw, it jumped genres. I was like, did they pick cryptids? What's the theme for this book overall, or is it still like very much along the same lines as the previous volume?
it is very much just along the lines of the same one. So, and I think we might even have been a bit looser than the previous anthology, but in honor of our best jacket, which is Scott Snyder's imprint, it's some type of play on words with the names of his kids. I don't quite remember. It's just every story has to include a jacket in some way. Some
Gotcha.
of them, like the story in the preview, which is available to all listeners, Zach's and Jacket. The jacket plays a very, very like pivotal role in the story. Whereas there'll be other stories like Yuma, which is
Hmm.
also there in the preview. It's just the jacket is more centered on the character design. One of the key components of the character design is that Yuma has a jacket on when she's doing all of her Western stuff. So that's just the theme. Jacket's got to be
Gotcha.
involved somehow in some way. Other than that, tell us your best story.
And so when it comes to editing, so you're both kind of on editor duties, in contributing. It seems like in a couple of different ways for this book. What's it like? I guess editing so many different genres of stories, and how do you like keep it all straight in your head? I guess I'll throw this over to you, Logan, first to see what was it like, and what kind of stories are you typically leaning towards?
It wasn't so much about any one kind of genre of story we were leaning towards. Our model for it was we want to help you tell the best story.
Right.
Because a Scott Substack class, it's a class. It's meant not to be perfect. It's meant to learn, and it's meant to eventually get you to a place where you have all the craft tools and the proficiency you need to publish professional comics. And it's a two-way street where like editorial is the same. It was let's get this, group of creatives together and we're going to do our best. And we've been more successful than, I could have any what am I trying to say? I didn't know what it was going to look like when I started
Sure.
because when we got all together, it was like, do we want to do volume 2? Do we want to do something else? Do we want to try to do a different thing? What do we want to do?
Gotcha.
And so then when we said volume 2, all of a sudden it became, oh, great, we have to follow how good the first book was.
Yeah.
And so the whole idea of it, our way of like sort of padding along the way to try to make it as much about the process of being creatives as it was to get something professional out there, was that we did this series of editorial peer review where back in like September at the end of the month, we were like, hey, please turn us in a pitch and turn us in the first draft of your script. And then we're going to get back to you on like what we think about the pitch, what we think about your first draft, and we're trying to get you to get to a place where you have a story that works really well and feels really solid in those 6 pages that you have before you hand it off to your artist. So then they had a month. At the end of October, we got draft 2. Draft 2, we said, like, consider that your final draft. We'll give you review. You can go ahead and make tweaks if you want, but that's going to be the one where you should probably have something that is as close to the script you're going to hand off to your artist as it's going to be. And then November through like we got a little loosey goosey with timelines just because holiday always threw
Of
everyone
course.
off, and like
Yeah.
the art part takes forever. So for the rest of the year, November, December, a little bit of hangover to start of January was like that's art phase. We did do a little bit where we were like the first 2 or 3 weeks, send us your layouts, send us like your first page in progress so we can give you some notes. We don't want you to get to page 5 and then all of a sudden have us go, hey, the panels look a little weird over here on page 2. It's
Right,
like
right.
these aren't people who have the the luxury of Tony Daniel to like have all the time to not time, I can't speak for Tony, but like he is already established, like he
Yeah,
knows
yeah,
enough to like just sort of go there and do, and that's his job. That
yeah.
is his, wake up in the morning until the evening. That's the job.
Right.
But with some of the people that we're working with, they're like students, or they work during the day and they are squeezing in their passion project when they can. And so the idea was, if we're going to budget this review in to honor your time the best that it can, because we don't want any of those bumps in the road to happen.
Right, right.
So then we got the final comics. We did one final really quick round where it was just like, hey, can you fix the lettering here? Wording's a bit weird. Any final tweaks? We got that done by about mid-January. So the whole book's been done for like 2 or 3 months now.
Okay.
We got all of that done. And the really hefty part on the creatives part, that'll happen first. The hefty part on editorials part happened second, which is kickstarting and so on and so forth.
Gotcha.
So the whole mission of it was recreate the parameters of what the stories are about, but tell us your best story, and we're going to do our best to help you tell your best story, whatever it is.
Gotcha.
Well, I wanted to add on that because you asked about how we decided, like, because we weren't necessarily looking for any type of story, but what it was like, how do we evaluate different kinds of stories? And that's why I'm really thankful that we did have an editorial team of 3 people. We have our other editor, JB, could not join us for the podcast tonight, just in the sense that even before final art came in, every single editor had a chance to look over the stories, and some, like, they either we had a system like every story had been read before any artist or should have been started working on their art, and that kind of creates a nice way where, like, maybe one story doesn't click with me or something, even if I'm trying to view it as objectively as I can, but Logan and JB are really hitting like what doesn't work, like this is what really works for it, and it helped kind of create a nice round like evening, whereas it's not just like, oh, it's all the stories I like or all the stories Logan likes. Tom
Right.
Brevoort, I hope I say his name correctly. He's a senior editor at Marvel. He's got a really great Substack newsletter. It's free. I recommend you read it. And it's someone asked him once, like,
Yeah.
are there any books on the line that you feel like don't pull their weight or that you don't like? And he was like, I'm paraphrasing, but he was like, yeah, there's plenty. Yeah, there's multiple books I don't like, but that's good because if the whole line is tailored just to my taste, then the Marvel line is not healthy because I know not everybody likes what I like. And so I'm glad we had, a
Right.
lot of various creators and more than just one person on the editorial team to help kind of work through the different types of stories that we received.
Yeah.
I wanted to follow up on something Mike touched on a little bit earlier. So we read the preview for volume 2, and as I was reading it, I was just writing down the genres of the stories. And like you guys mentioned, we have a western, a cryptid, a sci-fi story, something that feels a little more contemporary. So like, how do you guys go on about putting those things in order for when for your final release? Because as I read volume 1, like I was trying to make sense a little bit of like the like how one story, they don't really flow into another, but I know there's a method to that madness. I just really can't wrap my head around it. But since we have the opportunity to talk to you guys, I think you could shine some light on that.
Yeah. How do you not give your readers like extreme whiplash?
Yeah,
That
whiplash.
was, yeah. I mean, that was part of it. That figuring out the order for the entire book was probably the messiest Discord chat I've ever been a part of. There were so many reshares of just like a list of just 18 individual credit pages as we shifted things around and tried to get it started. I mean, there's a lot of things that goes into it. There might be some aspects we'll keep a tad secret, but part of it is shifting around, like, right, you don't want to combine like too many similar types of stories like in a row, stuff like that. We have Yuma first because it starts off with a bang, and that was part of our discussion, like, right,
Mm-hmm.
do we want to start off with something that's maybe slower, like a think piece, like you mentioned? That's actually JB's story there at the very end of the preview. Or I was like, I feel like that's a good thing, you might want to settle on versus you start off with a bang, something that's a bit more action focused to like draw the reader in, keep them going across the page. So that's kind of how the book that's how I view the preview, at least. Like, it starts with a bang, then Bigfoot versus Mothman is entertaining, but also a little bit more of a think piece. Zaxxon
Sure.
Jacket kind of picks back up, and then it ends with like a more slower paced story that you read for you to put the book down and think about. So that's how the preview went, and then you can kind of take that and extend it to the book, to the whole book. Logan might have things that I can tell you. There were definitely not like fighting, but us jawing with each other, trying to decide where we wanted certain stories placed based on which ones we enjoyed.
Sure.
But,
Yeah, it never got to a point where it was just like it must be this way. It was way more just along the lines of like, so there needs to be a slice of life story at this one. Does it belong after this story? That one? And it would get down to just like the little like we definitely had our own opinions of how the ebbs and flows of the book should go. Which again, to Jason's point, that's a sign of healthiness because that's actually going to create a natural kind of tension in the book. I don't mean that in like a negative stress, but like that's going to give a peak in a valley wave where it's like, oh, okay, there's thought put into why this story is here. And even if there isn't like necessarily a movement the way that an album would have it, there would still be enough of a logic to it where organically to the reader they go, okay, there's a I'm doing a little bit of this while I read.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's super crucial. I've read some anthologies that don't balance that well, and I feel almost tired by the end. You know what I mean? So it's good to hear that you guys, that was a good consideration, a big consideration as part of things. I was going to ask one other question about, and you feel free to not answer this, but do you have a particular favorite story out of this anthology? You don't have to name names, but a yes or no, or maybe reasons why you might like it over others. And it's okay to be selfish.
And Logan, should we name any stories
Honestly,
out loud or no?
I'm not going to name names. I'll say this. I don't have a single favorite story, and I'm not just saying that to be like, I don't have a single favorite story. Yeah, I'm not playing favorites. I legitimately mean this. Like, there's such a wide range of talent that's in the book that like there are some stories that like the merits of which what makes it special, it should say something about the creative team behind it.
Sure.
And there are so many stories in here where I'm like, you need to go on and tell more stories. There are other ones where I'm like, you need to take this character and make them into a series because I would buy that on the shelf every month if you did
Yeah.
that.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, not a
Mhm.
single favorite,
Yeah.
but there's just such it's a feast.
I definitely agree with that. I think the caveat I'd have is not saying any story isn't up to par, but we have so many great stories that are good at different things. And so like if you ask me, what's your favorite like action story? I could probably pinpoint two for you. Or like what's your favorite story that does this or does
Sure.
this?
Sure.
I could tell you which story and then, give you a speech on why I believe it accomplishes those things. So I'm really happy with how a lot of them came out. I'm really proud of the work all the creators did.
Yeah, that's great. I of course it's the worst question in the world for me to ask you guys, but I just wanted to hear what you had to say about the whole book. That's really what
Yeah.
it was.
Mike, I like that Mike wanted to like kind of start wrapping things up with like, pick your favorite child, please.
Yeah.
Right? Because this is just a labor for you guys.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say on that note, one thing I've been very appreciative of is when you're because I mean we navigate this through a Discord server and it's got like 70 plus people in it. And in that vein, I'm so thankful for our creators and the other editorial team and that I'll knock on wood. There haven't been any problems. Like there really hasn't been a ton of drama or like people getting upset at each other. Like all those things that you're like, oh, like we're managing, like there's a lot of people here. What do we do if someone gets really upset with someone else or, someone causes problems with someone else? So far, that hasn't happened. Maybe I shouldn't say that out loud, but I think that's a testament to all the people working on the book. Everyone's very motivated to see it be successful, to get it put together, stuff like that. So it's been nice in that regard.
Very cool.
That's great.
One last thing I did want to mention. So I wanted to talk a little bit. The cover for this volume 2, and I hopefully I'm pronouncing this right. Nayara Rodriguez is the artist for the cover. It is very cool. Like Jesse Lonergan and Skylar Patridge set the bar pretty high for the first volume.
Yeah, yeah.
When it comes to the cover, and I can't wait. Like in the future when this is out and we are actually looking at the Kickstarter. I can't wait to see what else is out there for some of those things. But I really wanted to shout that out because I think, doing a cover for an anthology it feels like it's a really tough job to encapsulate so much into just one image. I don't know if you guys have any insight into the process for the artist, or any, what the assignment is kind of for that.
Yeah, so what we did with it, and JB is the one who really is should be we should tip the hat to JB for finding Nye. Um and then presented some of the pieces to us. And we just sat with the first volume's cover, and it was like the whole idea is that it's inviting you in a sense. Like there's the jacket, we have that motif of an image, but then there's a portal into it that's like come into the jacket.
Yeah.
But then we were like, how do we expand that? And then the idea that we came up with was it's a cloakroom. It could be, like here's a closet, it's open, there's a portal into it, very Narnia-esque.
That's what I was gonna say. It gives
Yeah.
Narnia.
So when we were looking for artists, JB was the one who pitched Nye, and it just wound up knocking it out of the park. When we actually revealed the cover to people in the Discord server, they were all going bonkers. And like, I think the highest like compliment that cover can be paid was that when I went to say hi to Scott for the first time at C2E2 to drop the preview issues off that we handed out at his table, he looked at one of them that he took for himself, saw the cover, and I audibly heard him go, whoa, like looking at it. Like Scott Snyder
That's so
had
cool.
like literally his eyes popped a little bit looking at it, and I saw that happen in real time. So I was like, that is the highest compliment that I think Nye can be paid for that cover.
Definitely.
A little bit more, maybe I can be boring here with the details, but on the technical side, our philosophy was as much as we wanted to keep work of the book in house. And so like that's how we got Nye attached for that first cover, because she was in like the Discord, she was associated with JB. We just made our selection for a variant cover, but by this time those on the Kickstarter might have seen, or you guys will see it now. That was another theory, right? Because the goal is, right, you guys are all part of the class. We're part of the class, are associated with the class together. We want everybody to show off, their work, their versatility as much as they can. And so that's where we ended up with Nye coming from. We have again, the variant should be revealed by now. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet. I'm not sure. It's deep in our Kickstarter that we're about to get ready for the pre-launch page. So it'll be available soon. But yeah, that's where they came from. They came from people involved in the Discord of the class.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I guess to wrap things up here, I'm very excited for this Kickstarter. The first volume was a banger, and what we've seen so far has knocked my socks off. Honestly, everyone, go check out that preview because it looks incredible, and I'm excited to see what else is going to be in this book. For folks at home who want to check you guys out online or find more stuff about the Kickstarter, I guess, where can you direct them here? And I'll have all these links in the show notes as well.
At Cloakroom Comics on the Instagram and the Twitter. And then there's a link tree on both those socials that goes to the website where we have our Substack newsletter, have the Kickstarter, have the preview you can look at. And then I personally am at LWriter, WRITER, Rodgers on Twitter.
If you want to follow me for any reason, I'll say I'm Jason Holtzman 4 on. I'm Jason Holtzman 4 on Twitter. I can't speak to my Instagram username at the moment, but I don't use it a ton. I believe my last post was a screenshot of a conversation with my girlfriend telling me I should post so my followers know that I'm still alive. So I will be using it more. Soon it will become populated with advertisements and up and running again for the Kickstarter.
Cool. Very cool. Well, we'll make sure to have links to all that stuff in the show notes. Go ahead, Danny.
I was just gonna say, for anyone that is supporting the Kickstarter, Don't be a bad backer like me. Make sure to fill out your surveys once everything's done because it makes everyone's job a lot easier. I'm very sorry, CK. Thank you for reaching out to me directly for Volume 1. So please make sure to, if you back, when you back this Kickstarter, fill out your surveys, check your emails, check your Kickstarter. There's a lot of people working pretty hard to fulfill all this stuff. But I'm very excited for Volume 2. So good luck to everyone and go check it out.
Yeah, Logan, Jason, I'll make sure to give you Danny's personal email so that you can track him down if things go awry. But I guess to wrap things up for us, you can always follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Discord. We got links to all that stuff in the show notes. We've got our Goodreads group with our book of the month. We've got our YouTube channel that is just nonstop, constant content all the time. Thanks to our good friend Danny here. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/IRCB podcast, where you can get access to our Saga of Saga read-along series. You can get access to Giant Days of Our Lives, our Giant Days read-along series, Mike and Paul read Doom Patrol, IRCB Movie Club, and so much more. Mike's X-Men Blind Box, which is the most ridiculous, insane one-off show that we did, and apparently people love it, so go check that out. Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music. Zander is there to catch you when you fall in your dreams. I want to say thank you to Jason and Logan for being on this episode. Thank you to Danny, and thank you to all of you out there listening. If you got this far in the episode, you're a fantastic human being. Thank you so much. Until next time, though, comics are good, and so are you.